Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Supreme Court to deliver judgment on Governor Ademola Adeleke's victory in the July 16th Osun gubernatorial election tomorrow. Malian political coalition rejects military government's decision to hold constitution referendum on June 18th. Jury in Manhattan Federal Court set to hear closing arguments on Donald Trump's rape and defamation case. My name is Tunde Idowu. We begin with legal matters where the Supreme Court has fixed May 9th for judgment in the appeal filed by former Osun Governor Gboyega Oyetola against the election of Ademola Adeleke. In his appeal, Mr. Oyetola is seeking the reversal of the March 25th judgment of the Court of Appeal in Abuja, which affirmed Governor Adeleke's victory in the last governorship election in Osun State. The appeal court had in its judgment set aside an earlier judgment by the Osun Governorship Election Petition Tribunal, which held in favor of Oyetola and removed Ademola Adeleke. A 5-member panel of the Supreme Court announced the date after taking argument from lawyers to parties this morning. And outside Nigeria, a number of political associations in Mali have joined forces to oppose the military government's decision to hold referendum on a new constitution on June 18. The referendum announced on Friday is a milestone on the country's path towards election promised for February after a coup 3 years earlier. The referendum had been previously scheduled for March 19th but was postponed. The coalition is demanding the cancellation of the decree to convene the electoral bodies because it considers the ruling authorities illegitimate. The group also points out that more than 2/3 of the territory is being plunged into generalized insecurity. Mali is in the throes of an 11-year security crisis triggered by a regional revolt in the north that developed into a full-blown rebellion. In the meantime, Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko says he will no longer obey court summons or cooperate with the justice authorities unless his security is guaranteed. He said it was no longer justice but judicial banditry, and that is why he has made the decision still within the framework of a civil disobedience campaign to no longer collaborate with the court. Mr. Sonko stated that he had been subject to 5 court summonses, which he had obeyed except one on legal ground, despite propagandas that he was not respecting the institution. He said he had been the subject of so much fierceness, brutality, and an attempt almost at physical liquidation after being summoned by court. He was appearing to refer to his March claim of an assassination attempt when police allegedly sprayed a toxic liquid on him during a forced transfer to Dakar court. Mr. Sonko is facing 2 court cases that may bar him from contesting the presidency in next year's elections. Autopsies on at least 112 bodies of cold victims exhumed from shallow graves in Kenya's coastal Kilifi County have ruled out organ harvesting. Government pathologists said some of the victims died of starvation, strangulation, and suffocation. Kenyan police are expected to dig up more graves in search of victims of the cult, whose leader, Pastor Paul Mackenzie, allegedly encouraged them to fast to death in order to go to heaven. Mr. Mackenzie is in police custody pending investigation. The Kenyan Red Cross said that 360 people had been reported missing, while the authorities say at least 60 others have been rescued alive. President William Ruto has formed a commission of inquiry to investigate the deaths of the followers of the Christian cult. Still in Africa, the death toll following floodings and landslides in the Democratic Republic of Congo this week has risen to at least 401. The governor of South Kivu province, Theo Njuwabije Kasi, disclosed this, noting that 167 people were still listed as missing. Mr. Kasi told newsmen that a further 205 people were seriously injured in the flooding caused when rivers burst their banks following heavy rains on Thursday. President Felix Tshisekedi this morning declared a day of national mourning, and a team of ministers is set to travel to the region to coordinate humanitarian aid and disaster management. The current rainy season, typical for the South Kivu region, is expected to last until the end of May. To the Russia-Ukraine war, Russian missiles have hit several cities across Ukraine overnight, killing at least 4 persons and injuring several others. According to the General Staff of Ukraine's Armed Forces daily update, Russian forces launched 16 missile strikes last night, in particular on the cities of Kharkiv, Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Odessa regions. It added that in addition, 61 airstrikes and 52 attacks from the heavy rocket salvo fire system were launched over the past day on the positions of Ukrainian forces. Kiev's Mayor Klitschko said at least 5 people were injured in the capital amidst damage done to buildings and infrastructure. Ukraine's top military command says its forces destroyed all 35 Iranian-made shared drones that Russia had launched overnight. In the Middle East, 2 Quran burners have been executed in Iran for blaspheming convictions that included organizing anti-religious activities. The official news outlets of the Iranian judiciary reported that the 2 men identified as Yusuf Mehrdad and Sadoullah Fazel Zere were hanged early this morning. It disclosed that the case began 3 years ago when the Republic reported an unnamed group publishing obscene content, leading the judiciary to summon several people, one of whom was Mehrdad. Mehrdad was then found to be the administrator and main organizer of 15 online groups and channels that promoted content that was against Islam and its prophets and propagated atheism, according to the judiciary. It said Mehrdad was found to be collaborating with Fazeli Zari, who was also alleged to operate 20 anti-religion online groups. In the meantime, Syria is back in the influential Arab League more than a decade after being thrown out for its brutal repression of pro-democracy protests, which led to the ongoing civil war. The move is further evidence of a thaw in relations between Damascus and other Arab governments. Syria's readmittance comes ahead of a summit in Saudi Arabia later this month that President Bashar al-Assad may now attend. The US and UK have criticized the move. In a statement, Syria's foreign ministry said it had received the League's decision with great attention and called for greater Arab cooperation and partnership. Foreign ministers from 13 of the 22 nation group members were present at the meeting in Cairo, where the decision to readmit Syria was taken. And in Asia, Pakistan and Afghanistan's Taliban governments have agreed to boost trade and lower tensions along their border amid a surge in attacks on Pakistani security forces. Pakistani Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari and Afghanistan's Taliban-appointed Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi struck a deal yesterday in Islamabad. According to Pakistan's foreign ministry, the agreement is designed to improve bilateral trade, combat terrorism, and boost bilateral ties. The ministry in a statement said the 2 sides reaffirmed their desire to pursue continuous and practical engagement. Moving on, at least 22 people have died after a double-decker boat capsized off the coastal town of Tanor in the Malappuram district of India's southern state of Kerala. Malappuram district's junior superintendent of police, Abdul Nazar, said the boat, which was carrying about 40 inbound passengers, overturned at about 7 p.m. local time yesterday evening as it was overcrowded. The state sports and fisheries minister, V. Abdurrahman, who was helping to coordinate rescue efforts, said most of the victims were children on school holidays. Mr. Abdurrahman told reporters last night that the death toll was likely to rise as the boat was struck in muddy waters and was being pulled out to rescue those trapped inside. It was not clear what caused the tourist boat to overturn near Toval Terra Beach in Tanor. You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this break.
Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white supremacist in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Western Spring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history. Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905, Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker, and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. First television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Western Spring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo as a major character in history.
Thank you for staying with us. Moving on, in the U.S., a jury in Manhattan federal court is set to hear closing arguments from lawyers representing Donald Trump and writer E. Jean Carroll in her civil lawsuit accusing the former president of raping her in the 90s and later defaming her. Trump's attorney, Joseph Tacopina, told U.S. District Judge Louis Kaplan last Thursday that his client waived his right to testify in the trial and also opted not to present a defense in the case, gambling that juries will find that Ms. Carroll had failed to make a persuasive case. Trump has so far not attended the trial, which began on April 25, but told reporters in Ireland last Thursday that he probably would attend. Justice Kaplan has scheduled closing arguments for today, with jurors due to begin deliberations after that. Ms. Carroll, aged 79, filed her lawsuit last year against Trump, claiming he raped her in a dressing room at the Bergdorf Goodman department store in Manhattan in 1995 or 1996, and then defamed her by denying it happened. Meanwhile, the Republican chairman of the U.S. House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee has threatened Secretary of State Antony Blinken with contempt of Congress if he does not comply with a subpoena seeking a classified cable related to the August 2021 U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. In a letter to Mr. Blinken dated Friday and released this morning, Representative Michael McCall said information that has been provided about a decent channel cable sent in July 2021, and the department's response to the cable were insufficient to satisfy the committee. The committee issued a souvenir in March seeking the information. The Decent channel allows State Department officials to communicate directly with senior officials. A Wall Street Journal article in August 2021 said the cable warned top officials of the potential collapse of Kabul soon after the withdrawal of U.S. troops. The State Department has said some information can only be shared with senior officials to protect the identity of those expressing dissent. Still in the U.S., police in the state of Texas have said at least 7 people were killed and 10 injured after a car plunged into a group of people waiting for a bus near a shelter for refugees, migrants, and homeless people. The incident happened yesterday in the border town of Brownsville when a silver-gray SUV reportedly ran a red light and mounted the curb where the group was waiting. Police arrested the driver, and investigators said it was not yet clear whether the act was intentional. However, the man has been charged with reckless driving and could face additional charges. Brownsville police investigator Martin Sandoval said it could have been intoxication, it could be an accident, or it could be intentional. The Range Rover ran the light that was about 100 feet away and went through the people who were sitting in the bus stop.
Criminal investigation, there's 3 different factors that we have to look at. 1 is intoxication, that's why we have doing a toxicology report. 2 will be accidental, which means that something occurred that was an accident that caused this accident. Or 3 would be intentional, which means that he intentionally did it. Now, I know there is a report out there that they're saying that it was intentional, that Brownsville Police is saying that this was an intentional accident. Well, I'm here to clarify that Brownsville Police has never taken the stand that it was an intentional accident. It is a factor that we have to look at because there's 3 different factors. With that being clarified, we are doing the best we can. We're still out here. We're doing the investigation. Detectives are working, and this is a case that we're going to continue to work 24 hours a day if needs be. And as more information becomes available, we'll be releasing it out to the media.
In the meantime, China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang said it is imperative to stabilize Sino-U.S. relations after a series of erroneous words and deeds threw ties back into a deep freeze. Mr. Quinn, in a meeting in Beijing with U.S. Ambassador Nicholas Burns, stressed in particular that the United States must correct its handling of the Taiwan issue and stop the hollowing out of one China principle. The relationship between the world's 2 biggest economies sank to a low last year when then Speaker of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi paid an official visit to democratically governed Taiwan, angering China, which claims the island as its territory. In response, Beijing severed formal communications channels with the United States, including one between their militaries. The tensions between the 2 superpowers eased in November when U.S. and Chinese leader Joe Biden and Xi Jinping met at a G20 summit in Indonesia and pledged more frequent dialogue. Mr. Quinn told Mr. Burns that a series of erroneous words and deeds by the United States since then have undermined the hard-won positive momentum of Sino-U.S. relations. And in South America, at least 27 workers have been killed in a fire at a remote gold mine in southern Peru, one of the worst mining accidents in the country's recent history. According to authorities, the miners were working about 330 feet below the surface when a short circuit on Saturday sparked a blaze that quickly engulfed one of the tunnels. Images on social media showed flames and smoke erupting from the hillside at La Esperanza, one mine in the Arequipa region. Grief-stricken relatives gathered near the site in the town of Yanaquija awaiting news of their loved ones. News of the fire was also published yesterday once police had gathered details of those who were killed. Rescue teams were trying to secure the mine before removing the bodies. Chilean right-wing parties have won a majority of votes to elect advisors to draft a new constitution, marking a sharp shift from a progressive majority that drafted a failed first constitutional rewrite. With 95.13% of ballots tallied, Chile's Republican Party, led by former conservative firebrand presidential candidate Jose Antonio Caz, secured nearly 35% in yesterday's vote. A separate coalition of traditional right-wing parties gained more than 20% of the vote, while President Gabriel Boric left-wing coalition gathered about 29%, while centrist party took the remainder of the vote. Mr. Caz, who lost to President Boric in 2021, reacting to the results, said today was the first day of a better future, a new start for Chile, adding that the people have defeated a failed government. The final results will determine the exact makeup of a 50-seat constitutional council that will be in charge of drafting a new constitution. In other news, Australia's centre-left Labour government has pledged to include 14.6 billion Australian dollars in the federal budget for cost of living relief for families and businesses, promising it will not stoke inflation. The plan, announced this morning, is designed to directly ease price pressures and inflation, which retreated slightly in the first quarter but still sits near 30-year highs of 7%. Treasurer Jim Chalmers, in a statement ahead of tomorrow's federal budget, said the centerpiece of the budget will be cost of living relief that doesn't add to inflation. He noted that the government has carefully calibrated and designed the budget so that it takes pressure off the cost of living rather than add to it. The financial assistance will be spread over 4 years and be targeted at more than 5 million low-income families, small businesses, and pensioners struggling with high power bill. And in Europe, German industrial production fell more than expected in March, partly due to a weak performance by the automotive sector, spurring again recession fears in Europe's largest economy. Production decreased by 3.4% on the previous month, following a slightly revised increase of 2.1% in February. The Federal Statistical Office disclosed this morning. The Economics Ministry said after a buoyant performance by industrial production at the beginning of the year, there was an unexpectedly sharp decline in March. In the first quarter, production was 2.5% higher than in the last quarter of 2022, according to the Statistics Office. Elsewhere, Go Airlines this morning asked the India's Company Law Tribunal to urgently pass an order on its insolvency plea, citing lessor's effort to take back planes. The push comes less than a week after the cash-strapped Indian airline filed for bankruptcy, blaming faulty Pratt & Whitney engines for the grounding of about half of its fleet. This morning, Go First lawyers told the tribunal to urgently pass the order, noting that its lessor had moved to repossess the planes, even as bankruptcy proceedings were ongoing. Meanwhile, Pratt & Whitney told a New Delhi arbitrator hearing its dispute with Go that the Indian Airlines' claim of defective engines causing its demise was outstanding and without evidence. Go's fall marks the first major airline collapse in India since full-service carrier Jet Airways filed for bankruptcy in 2019. And talking sports, Lionel Messi has resumed training with Paris Saint-Germain after the forward was suspended for making a trip to Saudi Arabia and missing a training session as a result. French media reported that Messi was suspended for 2 weeks after an unauthorized trip to Saudi Arabia, when he was supposed to train with the squad the day after the league leaders' 3-1 defeat to Lorient last month. Messi, who apologized to PSG and his teammates on Friday, was left out of the squad for their 3-1 win at second-bottom Troyes yesterday. The Ligue 1 side posted a picture of the Argentinian striker training on social media. PSG are 6 points clear of Lens and 8 in front of Olympique de Marseille, with 4 more rounds of games remaining this season. Before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of what's up stories. The Supreme Court has fixed May 9 for judgment in the appeal filed by former Osun Governor Gboyega Oyetola against the election of Ademola Adeleke. A number of political associations in Mali have joined forces to oppose the military government's decision to hold referendum on a new constitution on June the 18th. A jury in Manhattan Federal Court set to hear closing arguments on a civil lawsuit against former U.S. President Donald Trump. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. I am Tunde Ido. Good evening.